Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the MCU Perspectives What If Edition. And today we're going to be discussing episode 6 of Marvel's What If? What if Killmonger rescued Tony Stark? Now, like with the T'Challa became Star-Lord episode, this episode takes two characters that essentially have nothing to do with each other in the main timeline and then throws them together in a rather interesting situation. In this case, we all know the story of Tony Stark, especially in relation to the MCU, how he was a weapons manufacturer, head of Stark Industries, but while visiting Afghanistan to show off his new weapon, the Jericho missile, his convoy was attacked by the Ten Rings, and he was kidnapped, and in the resulting attack, he got shrapnel embedded in his heart, which required an arc reactor to power an electromagnet to keep it from going further and killing him. And result, to escape, he and a fellow prisoner wound up taking the material to build the Jericho missile and created the first Mark I Iron Man armor. And while his fellow prisoner died in the escape attempt, Tony managed to escape, make it back to the U.S., and decided, you know what, we're not going to make weapons anymore, and thus continued upgrading the armor until he became Iron Man, determined to essentially right the wrongs that he himself wrought, so to speak. And then on the flip side, though, we have Eric Killmonger, who was the son of a prince of Wakanda, and whose father was in deep cover in the United States, was selling Wakanda technology to outsiders, and because of this, the king of Wakanda, his brother, T'Challa's father, wound up killing him, and to save themselves from reprisals, they just left him behind, and thus he kind of grew up on the streets, eventually making a name for himself, but eventually growing up, actually going on to honors or leading a commando unit and earning the name Killmonger. Though ultimately he developed a strong hatred for white people, so to speak, to the point where he wanted to go pretty much do all-out war. And as a result, he manipulated things to get back into Wakanda, stationed himself as king with the intent of going to war. But ultimately, T'Challa was able to stop him before things could get worse. However, we have to reverse both stories a little. The thing is, what Killmonger ultimately wanted was a war. He wanted an all-out battle with himself at the top, being the one that ultimately reaps the spoils of war, so to speak. Because in his own mind, in order to change things, you have to have power, and you have to take that power out against those that you perceive as your enemies. So, with that said, what if, while on one of his assignments, Killmonger happened to stumble across a vital piece of information, something that he knew would get him in good with someone already in a high position of power? What if that someone was Tony Stark? And that's where this episode comes in. For, as Killmonger himself later admits, while he was on assignment, he was in deep cover with the Ten Rings, and he stumbled across their plot to kidnap Tony. And as a result, when Tony's convoy was attacked, and Tony was about to get caught in the blast from one of his missiles, Killmonger managed to come in, grab the missile, and chuck it away, resulting in him saving Tony's life. As a result, Tony never becomes Iron Man. He never gets captured, he never develops the armor, and when he does eventually return to the States and has that big press conference where in the main timeline he would have said, we're no longer making weapons, in this timeline he says, no, the solution is we need bigger and better weapons, and I'm gonna make Eric over there, because I forgot his real name was Eric, I'm gonna make him my chief of security. And to further ingratiate him, Killmonger ultimately reveals that Obadiah Stane was the one who bankrolled the kidnapping plot, resulting in Stane being arrested and getting punched up by Happy Hogan, because let's be honest, that's kind of cathartic. And as such, Tony, even further impressed, ends up taking Killmonger on as the COO of Stark Industries, which, while Killmonger is a bit apprehensive about, he does ultimately decide, okay, sure, I'll do it. In the meantime, though, Pepper Potts is not buying the nice guy act from Killmonger. As such, she talks to Rhodey and tries digging up any dirt she can on him, but of course, his record is spotless. Graduated with honors at MIT, got into the commando unit. Apparently, like, has a very high kill count. Ultimately, he just seems like a good soldier, and he's got a lot of clout to him, so it doesn't look like there's anything to him. Which is exactly why Pepper is suspicious. Everybody that wants to get close to Tony gets close for something, and yet Killmonger seems to want nothing. And that just seems weird. As such, Tony and Killmonger continue collaborating, and Killmonger admits that if they want to build better weapons, they're going to need that they'll need to find something that they need to find a way to utilize it. They'll need, like, maybe unmanned drones or something. And so he tells Tony about, like, a thesis he made while he was in college for a drone that he called the Liberator, which funny line when Tony brings up the blueprints of the Liberator. It looks very like edgelord Gundam style, and even Killmonger mentions that he designed it after anime, which I thought was kind of amusing. And as such, Tony and Killmonger begin trying to design the thing, and just like in the main timeline when Tony tried building the Iron Man armor, they of course get some technological hiccups, but Killmonger admits that maybe, just maybe, they can find a good power source for it. Because one of the major problems we're having is that there's no energy source on Earth that can power these things, because they're just too advanced and too high-tech. Well, while Tony does throw out possibly building a mini arc reactor, though he also shuts it down almost immediately, Killmonger admits that what if they used vibranium? And of course he uses the example of his Wakandan ring, and yeah, he thinks that the power source from that would be viable. The only problem is there's only so much. No one knows. There's not a lot of vibranium on Earth, and as Tony admitted, the only vibranium stash they had was used for Captain America's shield. So they're kind of SOL. However, they do still have a connection, someone that they can do, and it's someone they can get vibranium from, and this is someone that both Tony and Killmonger know. Ulysses Claw. Unfortunately, though, when Tony and Killmonger propose this idea to Pepper, she immediately shoots it down because the guy's a black market dealer. This will look bad on them if things go south, which Killmonger agrees. So he admits, what if we had a liaison, someone that could act as a go-between? And so Tony admits, why don't we have Rhodey do it? Because he's military and he's a Stark liaison, so why not? And so Tony goes to meet with Rhodey. Sorry, I got my names mixed up there. Rhodey goes to meet with Ulysses Claw, Rhodey does get guidance from Killmonger through an earpiece, and he does manage to find Claw's stash of vibranium. And just to really recap, if you don't remember, Ulysses Claw was the guy that Ultron went to in the Age of Ultron movie, and the guy that Killmonger was working with in Black Panther. But of course, as Claw's showing Rhodey the vibranium stash, the lights in the warehouse start going out. And we see that has come in and is starting to take out the guards. And that person is the Black Panther, who, for some reason, is T'Challa right now. And before you say, well, of course T'Challa is the Black Panther, why wouldn't he be? I thought the title of Black Panther was reserved for the King of Wakanda. And before you say, well, the King is older now, and based on his physicality, he may not be fit enough to do it, so maybe he just passed the title along to his son. Except they openly have stated and shown in the movies that the title of Black Panther is usually reserved for whomever is the king, which was T'Challa starting from Captain America Civil War. So why is he the Black Panther here? Especially since we do see in the movie his father is alive. And there's more to it than that, because actually I'll get to that when I get to that, but yeah, it's just weird seeing T'Challa as Black Panther. Again, you can make the argument that maybe because his father's not physically fit enough for the role anymore, he let T'Challa take it, but I don't know, I feel like they just threw that in there because T'Challa's more recognizable. However, while T'Challa does manage to take out almost all the guards takes out all the guards in the place, he doesn't take out Rhodey. However, they both immediately get interrupted when they both get hit by a sonic cannon. One made by Stark Industries, and the one operating it is Killmonger. Yeah, as we soon learned, this was a setup. Killmonger alerted Claw to this, told them to leak information to Wakanda, and ultimately it got the Black Panther running to get back their stuff. So naturally, Killmonger came in and immediately killed T'Challa with a sonic weapon, took one of his Black Panther gloves, and then when Rhodey asked why, pretty much just Killmonger told him, why would you serve those that would oppress you? And Rhodey's response is, if you want to change the system, you gotta work from the inside, or you gotta shape it from the inside. And Killmonger's like, no, you don't. And then he stabs him with the Black Panther claws. As such, he then puts the sonic thing in Rhodey's hands, and as such, from both sides on the outside, since no one knew that Killmonger was there, because he pretty much swept security, it looked as though that Rhodey and T'Challa killed each other, and yeah, both sides are not exactly happy about this. In the meantime, Tony, of course, is mourning for the loss of his friend, since Rhodey was still his friend, and it was still his friend no matter what timeline you're in. And so when Killmonger goes to him to show him the spoils of war, i.e. a Wakandan spear, Tony tells Killmonger that he knows he's full of crap. Because while he may have swept security, Jarvis knows everything inside and out, and it turns out that Jarvis was keeping an eye on the situation, and so he knows that Killmonger was the one that killed Rhodey, and by extension, Tony knows. As such, Killmonger just scoffs out. I was like, okay, fine, call the cops, but you'll be dead before they get here. And Tony's like, oh no, cops enforce the law. I want justice. And so Tony locks down his mansion and brings in the first Liberator drone, because it turns out that while they were gone, he melted down the vibranium ring that Killmonger gave him and used it to power the drone. Tony thinks that the drone will make short work of Killmonger since its moveset is based off of Killmonger's moveset, but ultimately Killmonger manages to slice the thing up by being freestyle, stab it in the head, and then ultimately nailing Tony to the wall with his spear. And as such, while Tony says, and of course both men lament that they had to come to this, because Tony thought that they were a lot alike, that they were two guys just trying to live up to the memories of their fathers, but of course, but Killmonger says, no, we're not alike. And Tony's like, no, they sound very similar to me. And to which Killmonger responds, the difference between you and me is that you don't see the difference between you and me. And so he takes the spear and stabs Tony in the chest, killing him. And because it was a Wakandan spear, it looks like that Wakanda are the ones that killed Tony. As such, with his death, the General Thunderbolt Ross comes in and through Killmonger's urgings, they decide that they need to wage war on Wakanda because they clearly are hostile to them, which is a little dumb, I suppose. But then again, Rhodey was there, so you can make the argument that maybe they'd fall, that maybe they'd think that was the case. But in the meantime, pretty much the military seizes all Stark assets, so Stark Industries is now a subsidiary of the U.S. military. And so they order like an army of Liberator drones be created and sent off to Wakanda. As such, Killmonger is leading the charge, and he's with the army when they get sent over to Africa. And of course, when he meets Ulysses Klaue, who brings Killmonger to Wakanda, since as we know, Killmonger doesn't know where Wakanda is. However, the instant that Klaue brings him to the edge, Killmonger shoots him and presents him to the Wakandan guard as a peace offering. Like, this is the guy that stole your stuff. I'm here to make peace, just like in the Black Panther movie. Only this time, he's able to suck up more to his uncle, because most likely his uncle feels guilty for killing his brother, and well, he's still his nephew, so why wouldn't he? As such, he warns them about the attack on the Liberators and says that we have to go to war, we gotta prepare for battle, and so forth, and yada yada yada, yada yada yada. And his plan is essentially let the drones in because they're operating on a hive mind that's connected to Jarvis. And so the shields of Wakanda would be able to cut them off from that signal, and they'd just be rendered useless. However, even as he's doing this, Suri, who actually, detail I love how she's now like a preteen in this movie, which makes sense considering the timeline of events that between this movie and when she would canonically appear in the MCU. So I like that little detail. I think it's cool. But she's calling BS on this too. Like, she thinks this is a little too convenient, and that why should they be trusting this guy? He's not really one of them. And of course the uncle's like, no, he's one of us. He's a son of Wakanda. But she's still obviously suspicious and thinks that this seems a little too convenient. As such, they let the plan go through. They let the army come. They open up their shields and let the Liberator army come in. And of course, once they close the shields, they shut down. And at first, everyone thinks that everything's cool, everything's nice. Only Killmonger had another switch on him. But when he activates it, the Liberator Army comes online. And of course, nobody saw him activate it. And he says, Tony Stark, he was a villain. He obviously had a backup system involved. And so they go to war. He charges in riding on a rhino, which admittedly looks really damn cool. And ultimately, they destroy the Liberator Army. As such, the King of Wakanda, his uncle, ultimately decides, thinks, he's trustworthy, he welcomes him back with open arms, and thinks that he's a loyal soldier of Wakanda, and so he decides, and Killmonger even says, I am yours, even tells him, I'm yours to command, and so he decides, okay, you know what, you'll be the new protector of Wakanda, I'm gonna make you the Black Panther, which, again, I don't doubt that he would have that honor, but again, I don't doubt that he would have the power to name someone as the Black Panther, but again, I thought the title of Black Panther was reserved for the king. And before you say, well, maybe they gave him the suit, again, they get, remember that juice that T'Challa and Killmonger had to drink in the movie to give them their superpowers? Well, they give him that. So, again, I thought that was part of the whole ritual for becoming the king. Having that. You won the fight, you took the juice that gave you the right to be Black Panther, and that's what led you to becoming king. Again, why don't they have that in this one? Why does, can't he just hand it out again? It just, I don't know, it feels weird. And of course, after he drinks the juice, he has his little vision quest, and goes to that weird ethereal plane in the other world where the spirits of those that died are. And so when Killmonger's there, he of course meets with the spirit of T'Challa, who asks him, was it worth it? And of course, Killmonger's like, yeah, it was worth it. Worth it. We're gonna fix everything. And of course, T'Challa's response is, your way of fighting violence and chaos is to incite more violence and chaos. And of course, and Killmonger is still just writing him up, but T'Challa tells him that eventually that things are going to come back around. Things are going to come back to bite him in the ass, whether on this plane or whether on his plane or the ethereal. But again, Killmonger just writes it off, and when he wakes up, he's made the new Black Panther. However, all hope is not lost, as back in the U.S., as General Ross is planning to launch a whole bunch of Jericho missiles at Wakanda, since they know where it is, because they had visuals up until the shields cut them off, so they know where Wakanda is. He's ready to just launch the Jericho missiles and continue on with the war, continue escalating it. And Pepper, of course, but Pepper is still dubious, and so she goes to her office to just kind of calm down. Only Shuri is there waiting for her. It turns out that, Shuri was still very suspicious of Killmonger, and with enough digging, she was able to figure out what Killmonger had done. And she wants Pepper's help to try and expose him and ultimately reveal that both sides are being played. Ultimately, Pepper says, well, we're going to have a... It's like, yeah, we know this, but the people we're working for don't want to keep this going. And so Shuri says, well, then we'll convince them that what they're doing is wrong together. And that's where the episode ends. So, yeah, kind of another cliffhanger ending, huh? Alright, so my thoughts on the episode? Okay, I'll just say it right now. I think this one's the weakest. I know I said that about, say, what if the world lost its mightiest heroes episode, but in that one, at least, it had a good mystery and some good action and as you saw the Avengers falling, it kept making you wonder who the killer was, even if the twist still kind of felt a little out of left field. Again, the reveal did explain how they all died, but still felt a little out of left field, plus the whole thing with Loki. But here, the problem mostly lies in the story and how it lies in two very big areas. The story and how it ends. Because the thing is, I feel, because of the name of the episode itself, what if Killmonger rescued Tony Stark, you'd think this would be a story involving both of them, because Tony Stark has left a very big impact on the MCU. They even show that at the beginning of this episode, that because he was saved before he could be captured, he never learned that, oh my god, we are creating weapons that are hurting innocent people, and I need to fix that, which resulted in him becoming Iron Man, Iron Man, and ultimately that one decision led to a whole slew of things because he had a lot of influence on a lot of major events in the MCU, from joining the Avengers to fighting to helping stop Thanos to his ultimate sacrifice at the end of Endgame. That is all those are all very big things in the MCU. And of course, from a meta perspective, Iron Man was where the MCU started. It was his film that jump-started the entire universe. And so if he dies before he can start that legacy, it feels like that there's a lot missing. And how would the world develop around that? Or how would Tony develop now that he hasn't undergone that lesson? Like, how would he react to a lot of major things that occur in the MCU? Like, how would everything go if there was no Iron Man to fix it or lend a hand? Because Tony is still in his arrogant billionaire playboy mindset in this timeline. Again, when he has the press conference where he would have said we're done making weapons, in this timeline instead he says we got to build bigger weapons. So he's still kind of the arrogant asshole, and of course he still has all the idiosyncrasies and makes all the stupid decisions that come with that, which again, I feel like it would have been very interesting. Add on the fact that he's now friends with someone who we know in the main timeline is a supervillain. So how would that affect? How would Tony develop with Killmonger right there, whispering in his ear, tempting him and telling him, you gotta do this, you gotta do that, and it's all for the greater good, etc. I feel like that would have been a very interesting story. And if that had been showcased throughout the episode, seeing Tony in that mindset as he's being manipulated by this villain who's trying to steer everyone to war, I think that would have been very interesting and would have been so cool to see and so cool to see developed. Instead, it's mostly Killmonger's story. And don't get me wrong, it of course would need to be a story, even if Tony played a bigger part, because again, as we know, he's a bad guy in the main timeline. And of course, even here, it seems just a little too convenient for him to be in the places that he is. So of course we would probably think, well, why isn't he there? Like, well, what's his end goal here? And of course, it's the same end goal that he had in the main timeline. All-out war with himself at the top. That in order to stop the prejudice and violence, we need more prejudice and violence. Essentially just due to the white guy that they did to us. That's what his plan is, essentially. Which, yeah, it still shows that he's still the same nutball that he was in the main timeline. But, again, while that would make sense, that does make sense, I feel like it would have been better if we had Tony be more of a constant force. Like, we see him manipulating Tony throughout the whole episode, and in the meantime, Pepper may be there on the sidelines trying to convince Tony that something isn't right, that that things aren't making sense, that Killmonger might be playing him. But neither Tony only barely listens to her or writes her off, but there's still like that lingering suspicion. He helps build the Liberators, he thinks what they're doing is for the greater good, with Killmonger always urging him on, but then when things start going wrong, that's when Killmonger betrays him and Tony realizes, oh crap, I've been played. Like, that whole confrontation, remember back, with that whole confrontation in the middle of the episode, where Tony confronted Killmonger and revealed that he had a Liberator on his side and wanted to kill Killmonger? I think that confrontation would have been better if it would have been put at the end of the episode. Like, have Tony's words, it would make Tony's words have more meaning to them, make them feel stronger, and make them feel and have much more depth to them, and more weight. Instead, because they killed Tony at the halfway mark, he's not even it's clear that throughout the episode, he's not a main character. And I think that's the sad part. Like, again, the fact that part of what precipitates this reality and what sets it down his path is that Tony's life was saved, and yet Tony is only a side character in Killmonger's story. A stepping stone for him to reach his ultimate goal. Just another body to add onto the pile, which I think sucks, especially since so much of the MCU has been kind of built on Tony's back. So to kind of lose that support and see what it would do to the MCU, as well as to see what it would do to Tony, especially with Killmonger there, I think that would have been so interesting to see. But again, he gets chopped down halfway through the episode, and it's clear from there on it's Killmonger's story, and that it always was Killmonger's story. And again, it would need to be Killmonger's story. His whole plan here is with the premise of the episode, of course he'd be up to something, and admittedly, his plan is actually really damn efficient. He's playing both sides against each other. He ingratiated himself to Tony by saving his life back in Afghanistan, and which point he managed to worm his way into power by just letting Tony play everything and just acting like, oh no, but well, okay, sure. Like, that's how he did it. Just planting the seeds and ideas in everybody's heads, setting up events to make Wakanda look like the bad guys to America, and America look like the bad guys to Wakanda, ultimately allowing them to clash, and with him on top on both sides, since he was the COO of Stark Industries, and he's the one that said they're the ones that did all this. And then when he goes to Wakanda, he's like, I'm your long lost nephew, and I'm here to warn you that the Americans are launching an attack from these robots powered by vibranium, and then charges in to look like the hero. It's brilliant. It's freaking brilliant. Play both sides against each other and make yourself look like the hero in the end. It's amazing. And I think those are some of the best plans. They're very Machiavellian and ultimately work to the advantage of the villain, because no matter which side comes out on top, you're the one in charge. And while it's clear he probably wants Wakanda to win since they're the ones with the great technology and, well, the king made him the Black Panther, at the same time, even if Wakanda somehow lost, he would still be in such good graces with the U.S. military that he could probably still work his way up and ultimately twist things to his advantage. It's smart and creative, and ultimately it works so well for the episode. Ultimately, it ultimately helps because he's played them so well that nobody suspects him except for Pepper and Shuri. And ultimately, the episode does end with them getting ready to start a campaign to take him down. But again, while that's a good plot, and that's a good plot, and he executes it well, again, the episode should have been equal focus that and equal focus Tony Stark, because it would have been interesting to see the developments there and how it would affect him, rather than just having him be killed off halfway through the episode for the sake of advancing Killmonger's evil plans. So, yeah, I'm going to call that a problem, because I feel like that should have been better expanded on. And of course, there is probably kind of the idiot mentality, because I know nobody else knows, but the fact that everyone buys it so readily, but nobody suspects Killmonger is kind of dumb, especially since he was so close to Tony and he was the one in charge of everything. And like Shuri said, he was an outsider. He wasn't raised in Wakanda. Who knows what he was doing in the outside world, or what he wants to do, or why he came back to Wakanda when he did. Of course, everyone just writes it off. So, of course, Pepper and Shuri are the ones that do this. And, of course, there's another problem. That's where it ends. It's the same thing as in the last episode. They don't resolve the story. They just keep it going to a point and then drop that little nugget of, oh, things might get better, and then just, that's it. Game over. That's it. Oh, well, to be continued in an episode that may never happen. Sucks to be you, I guess. I don't like that. I don't like that at all. And that's another reason why I was annoyed with the last episode. But even then, I probably say the last episode did it better, because it was such an interesting portrayal with the universe, and that what made up for it was just seeing these heroes, twisted, and seeing what the survivors would do in the scenario. But again, in this episode, because of its nature, it feels like it's a wasted opportunity here. Again, what we have is not bad, but it feels so much lesser. It feels like it's cut in half, and because it ends so abruptly, it feels like the story is ended before the story was stopped before it even got a chance to keep going forward. Because with the ending, it feels like, oh, there's going to be something else, but then nope, episode over. They might end up stopping him, probably not. They probably will in the end, but it's annoying, and it feels like they're just there to say, oh, the story will continue on. Well, what about us? What about the audience? We saw this story begin. We want to see it through to the end. And you're saying, nope, we're done here? Now, again, maybe in season 2 there'll be another episode and they'll explain it, but what about until then? Are we just supposed to sit on our hands and wait for that to happen? I don't know. And again, that's just even if they want to continue the story. They might just stop it here, so if you were invested in the story, sorry, not getting resolved. Sucks to be you. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Again, what we have isn't awful. It's alright. It is genuinely alright. It's just that it feels like it feels like it should have been more, especially with Tony Stark not being Iron Man now in this timeline. There should have been more to the story. That we should have had half of what we got here, half how this affected Tony and the universe as a whole. That would have been so much better and so much interesting. And again, I could probably harp on the whole why is the child a Black Panther thing, though I've already talked about that, which I think is kind of dumb, but is a minor plot hole in this whole thing. I think the bigger problems are just it doesn't take full advantage of the scenario it's presented, namely Tony Stark survived and is now friends with a supervillain, and the fact that it just ends so abruptly. And again, what we do get is not bad. It's decent. I think it's decent. We see Killmonger acting as a rather competent and very intelligent villain, which I think works, even if he can be annoying, especially when he says Tony Stark set up the backup system and wants to make him look like a villain. Which, again, is only from the audience perspective, since we're privy to that knowledge and not the characters in the episode. But again, it feels like that it was just cut in half. Like, we got half of the story, the other half just thrown aside, and which wouldn't be too bad. Oh, actually, it would be bad, but with the fact that it was one that side story was on the back of a character who was so integral to the MCU, only to just be thrown aside. Yeah, I think at the end of the day, it was a lackluster episode. Not awful, but could have been better. Could have been a lot better. So yeah, overall, just kind of, not awful. Definitely still entertainment value. Still worth watching if you ask me, but definitely could have been a lot better than what it was. So take what you can get, I suppose. But yeah, I suppose that's about it. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoy my vlog. And if you disagree with me on the quality episode, feel free to leave a comment and let me know why you enjoyed it. And again, be polite, be nice. And again, just because you disagree with me does not mean you're wrong. Just because, again, that just means we have different opinions, and that's fine. So again, I hope you're not too mad at me, but that's how I feel. I hope you enjoyed the vlog regardless. And if you enjoyed the episode, that's fine too. And if you want to see me talk about more MCU-related material this week, on Friday, I'm going to be doing a vlog on Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. So if you want to go see that, go check that out on Friday. But if you're not and you're just here for What If, then I hope to see you next week when we talk about Episode 7. So, till then, have yourselves a good night. And I hope, yeah, see ya. Bye.